Let's go. Thanks, President. Thank you, guys.
What a remarkable and consequential half hour in the Oval Office with the freshly re-sworn in President of the United States, Donald Trump. The reporters in the room are what's known as the pool, a small group of reporters that are typically invited into events of interest. In this case, signing executive order after executive order after executive order after executive order passed to him by longtime advisor Stephen Miller. Susie Wiles, Donald Trump's new chief of staff, was also in the room. And what began slowly as he signed executive order after executive order, a reporter threw a question in, bit of a pause, then another, and then they all just went on just about anything. And Ellen Morrow in our bureau here in Washington, I want to come to you on the tariffs thing in a second. I'll just give the sobering headline, if you don't mind. Trump, on a day where Canada and Canadian officials have been down here trying to thwart the notion of sort of across-the-board tariffs being put on Canadian goods imported to the United States from Canada. I'm going to read my notes because it's important to say the words. He said, "We are thinking in terms of 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. I think we will do it February 1st. Again, this on a day when the suggestion earlier seemed to be that the trade relationship between the two countries would simply be reviewed at this point. And Ellen, before I go to you on that, I just want to give a couple of other. There was a lot in that back and forth with reporters. He signed executive orders getting rid of DEI hires, creating DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiencies, declaring national emergency on the southern border, which enables Pentagon resources, for example, to be freed up to go down to enforce blocking on the border. Withdrawing the United States from the World Health Organization because, as Trump put it, it's ripping off America. He talked about Greenland becoming, again, just as a notional concept, part of the U.S., taking control of the Panama Canal again, freeing up land in Alaska for drilling. He's not a dictator on day one. At one point, he was asked, did Joe Biden leave a letter for him? And he said, I don't know. And he pulled out, you saw it, Ellen, he opened the drawer and said, oh, there it is. I'll read it myself personally later, he said, then maybe read it to you all, everybody else, after the fact. But again, the kind of sobering headline here, Trump thinks he may well indeed put a 25% tariff on goods imported from Canada. He thinks that would happen February 1st. Ellen Morrow, there's a lot to absorb there. Again, a remarkable time in the Oval Office. What are your thoughts?
Well, Paul, I heard you refer earlier today to the fire hose of news from Donald Trump. And I don't even know how many hours ago it was that you said that. But that press conference there, that impromptu news conference in the Oval Office really sums that up. You just went through dozens of points. There are dozens of more points from what we heard from him there in the Oval Office signing those orders. But for Canadian eyes watching, what a roller coaster of a day. Going into Inauguration Day, there was a sense of dread because back in November, Donald Trump said that one of the very first executive actions he would take in office on day one would be to impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico unless more was done to toughen up the northern and southern borders. And then there was reporting this morning that Trump would not be imposing those tariffs on day one, that instead he would be launching an investigation into trade deficits and trading practices between the three countries, between the U.S. and Canada and the U.S. and Mexico. So that indicated, perhaps a bit of a reprieve, a sense of relief. But that was short-lived because, as you said, we had Donald Trump there in the Oval Office saying he thinks those tariffs could be imposed as of February 1st. Just to remind everyone at home, here's what that moment was like.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
Are you planning on giving notice of that?
I think we'll do it February 1st.
25% on both, sir?
On each.
On each.
So February 1st, Paul, is of course just about a week and a half away. There are still questions about how these tariffs would actually be imposed and implemented. There are some legal mechanisms around them, although presidents do have broad power to impose these kinds of tariffs. So if there was a sense of relief in Canada today, that specter of these tariffs is right back there with those comments from the president in the Oval Office.
I would say the other thing that he mentioned vis-a-vis Canada, he was asked at one point, are you going to have you met with foreign leaders? And he said, Trudeau, and then he goes, or Governor Trudeau, as I like to call him. He did not go any further into the 51st state business. But Ellen, dare I ask, what else stood out for you from that time in the Oval Office?
Well, there really was so much. These were the headlines we were sort of waiting for all day, particularly those executive orders on cracking down on illegal immigration, the declaration of an emergency at the U.S. southern border. That's always been a key part of Donald Trump's political message, and now we have those orders signed. And they are having an immediate impact. There are people along the border, for example, today, who had appointments with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol officials, appointments that they had set up through a Biden-era app that allowed migrants to use this app to set up those appointments. That program, those appointments were immediately canceled. There's video of migrants along the southern border today crying because they don't know what happens next for them. There's also anxiety in many U.S. cities about the possibility of raids by immigration and customs enforcement officials. Donald Trump was asked about that. He was asked if those raids would begin tomorrow. He said he didn't want to give a timeline, but that they need to happen. So there is a lot of anxiety. Trump officials and Trump himself in his speech today said that the first targets would be people who are illegally in this country with criminal backgrounds. So that was a big moment in the Oval Office tonight. And also the declaration of another national emergency, declaring a national energy emergency as Donald Trump tries to really ramp up U.S. energy production. We also, as you said, he signed orders relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and transgender protections. And these are all key points, Paul, that you know better than I do, that Donald Trump ran on in this campaign. And this is an empowered president signing a slew of executive orders.
I'm just going to break into you. We've got we've got Melanie Joly now reacting to Donald Trump's comments. Let's listen in.
We have a plan. The plan is threefold. The first one is we will continue to work on preventing tariffs, and that's also why we have a very strong border plan. Second, we will work on preparing for a response. That's why we're here, and we'll be going back with Cabinet, of course, working on retaliation. And thirdly, we have to work on our long-term response. And so this is an important moment for Canadians. We need to continue to fight for our interests, to defend jobs across the country. And we're calling every single political leader across the board, across the country, to stand united. Because now, more than ever, we need to make sure that